Chapter 3. "You again?" Asher asked, with a mix of anger and despair in his voice. Instinctively, he distanced himself from the wolf, finding temporary shelter in the opposite corner of the room. "What? You thought that I would wait another 15 years to visit you again? Oh, Asher, how naive. Our story is only beginning, boy," the wolf answered smugly. Asher was furious, scared, and confused all at the same time. "Why do you keep appearing, wolf? What do you want with me?" Asher asked loudly. "I have always been lurking in the shadows, watching you, listening to your thoughts and looking at your actions," the wolf replied with what seemed to be a calculated calmness. "I have been waiting for the right moment to reveal myself to you. I want nothing else but to remind you of how delicate things are and of how easily you can ruin them." The wolf paused and narrowed his eyes, which made his gaze feel particularly penetrating. "You could even say that I am here to help," the wolf added with a smirk. Even though the wolf never opened his mouth, his cold voice sounded loud and clear in Asher's head. His first syllables started sparking small white branches of lightning inside Asher. The next bit of syllables caused loud thunder and even more vibrant and complex shapes of lightning. And when the wolf said help, a whole thunderstorm broke loose inside Asher's mind. Thunder and lightning raged as it started raining, pouring, hailing. The fragments of ice were like frozen baseballs that kept hitting and scraping the walls of Asher's mind. His brain started hurting. Nothing made sense. "What are you talking about?" Asher yelled in the middle of the internal storm that had started to take control of him. "Help? You are not helping me at all. You are hurting me," Asher screamed in anger. "You're going to drive me crazy with all your horrible words and images. You're torturing me." Asher's nostrils were flaring as the tempestuous storm reached its peak. "You need to leave me alone," Asher yelled even louder as he ran straight towards the wolf with his fists clenched, ready to attack. But he could barely even touch the animal's hair strands before it vanished into thin air. Asher stopped dead in his tracks, right in time to avoid hitting the room's wall. He was panting. Those horrible images of him and Noah were out of his head for now, but the wolf would come back. Just the thought of it made Asher drop to the floor with a thud and start shaking in silence. The thunderstorm inside him came to a quiet halt, leaving only a freezing silence lingering in the air. The room's doorknob turned, and the door swung open in a haste. A figure walked in and switched on the bedside lamp right after having turned off the overhead lights. "Asher, honey, what's wrong? What are you doing on the floor? Why are you shaking? Are you okay?" The words coming out of the mouth of Asher's mom were almost too fast for him to process. He took a deep, shaky breath as he did his best to come up with an answer that did not involve a wolf. "Mom, I had a nightmare. A very ugly one. And I got very nervous and just needed a moment away from my bed. I heard you scream. I came as quickly as I could. I was worried that something had happened to you. I'm glad it was only a nightmare." "Yeah, only a nightmare," Asher said under his breath. "Come on, hon, let's get you to bed. You're still shaking. Let me give you a hand," Emma said warmly. Then she grabbed Asher by the arm and helped him up. The touch of his mother's caring hands made Asher feel a little calmer. She walked him to his bed. Asher sat for a moment and was then joined by her. "I see that you're still a bit nervous. Maybe it can help if you tell me a little about what you dreamed." The tenderness in Mom's voice felt reassuring. So Asher decided to respond with something that was as close to the truth as he could. In my dream, Noah got hurt really badly, and I couldn't stop it. I couldn't protect him, Asher said, dropping his head. Mom ran her fingers through Asher's hair. Oh, Asher, that does sound awful. I'm really sorry. She paused for a second. But that would never happen, son. You're such a great brother. I'm so proud of you. Really, she said, smiling softly. And Noah is perfectly fine. He's sleeping so deeply that none of our noise has woken him up. Come and take a look at him. Maybe that will help you feel reassured, and you can go back to bed. No, Asher replied immediately. His mom looked at him, confused. I just don't think it's necessary now, Mom, because talking to you has already helped me calm down, and I'm actually very sleepy now. So it's fine. Don't worry. I'll go back to bed now. Asher made his best effort at faking a smile and some tiredness. This seemed to calm his mom down. She gave him a kiss on his forehead, and then she left the room quietly. In reality, Asher was not sleepy at all. He was extremely awake, even more awake than before, because the mess in his head had just escalated in a significant way. Not only was his brain now contaminated with horrible thoughts, but it was now home to terrifying images as well. Thankfully, the mind horror had stopped, for now at least, but it had been such an awful experience that Asher couldn't have been able to relay it to anyone else accurately had he been asked to. Even though his mom's presence and words had helped him relax a bit, Asher was still very much on edge. He lay down in bed and turned off the bedside lamp. It was suddenly very cold, strangely cold. As a matter of fact, Asher had never felt this cold before. This made him wonder if his bodily temperature had somehow been affected by all the fear that he had just experienced. Grabbing his blankets and quilt, Asher wrapped them tightly around himself. The freezing sensation slowly started to leave his body until he felt comfortable again. Embraced by the pitch-black darkness and the silence of the night, Asher stared at the low ceiling and unconsciously bit his lower lip. Like bright constellations, the different events related to the wolf began to form and pop in front of Asher's eyes. Realizing that he had encountered the wolf twice within a span of less than 3 hours, Asher began to understand that the arrival of the wolf in his life was a lot more dangerous than he had first estimated. The wolf had been very clear. Our story is only beginning. Those had been his exact words. Asher's mind started to race. This went beyond the danger of his family and friends fearing him and rejecting him, beyond Asher losing them or having to leave for a faraway place to start over. This was much worse. If the wolf really were to become an intensely permanent part of Asher's life, a constant in each of his days, an uninvited stalker that came every couple of hours, Asher would be falling apart and turning into a puddle of extreme dread and nervousness at a very high frequency. This would practically render Asher himself completely useless at carrying out any tasks that involved his brain performing at its peak. He had been working harder than ever in school, focusing on maintaining his 4.0 GPA and an undeniably significant participation in the physics club. Asher needed that. He needed to be great. No, he needed to be perfect. This would lead to him being able to study in one of the top 5 colleges for physics and later to become a physics professor at a great academic institution. Asher would enjoy his work, which is, in the end, what comprises most of the waking time of an adult. Therefore, Asher would be a happy adult. Asher would not, could not become like his father. Asher would never allow himself to become an unhappy adult who got terrified at the thought of Monday mornings and any other morning except for weekends. He would not become an adult lost in thought and misery during what accounted for approximately 71% of his weeks. Asher Salazar vehemently refused to become a person who only seemed to be going through the motions. An unreachable mind, incapable of paying attention, of listening, or giving even the most basic form of advice. The real Gabriel Salazar only switched on for 2 days a week. Asher wanted more than that for his adult life. He would get more, much more than that. But for this to happen, he needed to be able to think clearly, to focus, to work hard no matter where he was in the world. Overwhelming emotions would destroy all his hard work and his future. It was clear. The wolf needed to be stopped. At around 10 a.m., Asher was woken up by his parents' traditional acoustic performance of the Happy Birthday song. It involved his dad playing the guitar and singing quite professionally, and his mom, full stop. Asher's mom wasn't the best singer, to say the least, but her warm presence compensated for her lacking musical abilities. And also very important, she always baked Asher's favorite dessert, strawberry cheesecake. He had never tasted a cheesecake that was as good as his mom's. This food from heaven was more than enough to forgive, and please forget, Mom's signature off-key singing. As Asher opened his eyes, he smiled at the sight in front of him. He had experienced these birthday mornings for over a decade now, but yet, somehow, he still found them just right. For a moment, he was even able to forget about everything that had happened starting at midnight. He laughed, he sang, he blew out his candles. Everything was so cheerful and calm at the same time. All this relief and happiness got Asher thinking about how thankful he was for his parents and how much he loved them. Asher's mom, Emma, was the computer programming whiz. She had taught him everything he knew about computer hardware and software. She was even more skilled than him at using a smartphone, which said a lot given that he was the one who had been born with technology. Her talents had helped her climb up the corporate tech world and achieve a position as a software engineer in a good company early on. She was now the current product manager of their popular parenting aid app. In addition, Asher's mom also taught English and programming to underserved Latin American communities. On top of that, she somehow found a way to balance it all and be there for her husband and children. Asher really admired her for her intelligence and big heart. On the other hand, his dad was from El Salvador, and he had lived his whole life there before moving to the States. He had always had a passion for music, something that he had inherited from his father's side. He had learned to play several instruments while growing up, but his favorite one was the guitar. He had also been part of a couple of music bands in El Salvador. None of them had succeeded, unfortunately. But Asher was sure that this hadn't been his dad's fault, because he was a heck of a musician. Once in the United States, though, keeping up with his passion for music had become increasingly hard for Asher's dad. Things worked very differently there, and he hadn't really found people his age who were seriously interested in music. After some time, Gabriel had accepted a job offer as a sales agent in a friend's car dealership. He had been working there since Asher was little. Asher knew that his dad was very good at his job because he had heard his mom say so. And as far as he could see, Gabriel was also paid well. But beyond that, Gabriel's job seemed to be a terrible burden that he was condemned to carry until his retirement. Every morning, Gabriel's face looked dull and strained, and every evening when he came back home, it was as if his soul had been completely sucked out during the day. Despite this, he would always do his usual chores around the house, but that was as far as he would go. It was almost impossible to talk to him because he barely paid any attention. His eyes would become fixated on any object that was around, which made him have a bit of a scary look. Most of the week, Asher's father looked scary and lifeless, a zombie. That's what Asher saw in place of his dad from Monday to Friday. It was always a relief to see his dad return to the world of the living during weekends. But it was also true that it was tiring for Asher to see him enter zombie mode every Monday. If Asher had to be honest, it was more than tiring. It was exhausting. Would Gabriel ever leave that company and do something that made him happy? At least his dad could find joy in his big family in El Salvador. It had actually been during a trip to the United States with his parents and siblings that he had met Asher's mom. The two of them had met in San Diego, her hometown, when Asher's dad's family had gone on vacation there. They had started a long-distance relationship that lasted until they were both finished with college. Afterwards, they had spent time together, both in El Salvador and in the States. Eventually, Asher's mom and dad got married in America and ended up moving to Syracuse, New York because of his mom's work. They settled down there and started a family too. They still went to visit Asher's dad's family in El Salvador almost every year, though. Asher had come to learn a lot about his dad on these trips, thanks to his abuelos and tios. He also had a whole bunch of primos that were a lot of fun. Spending time with his cousins was one of the things that Asher looked forward to the most throughout the year. El Salvador was great. Such an underrated country, Asher always used to say. Everything was so close by, so they could practically do whatever they wanted, whenever. They could go to the beach, to the lake, to the mountains, or to volcanoes, anything they wanted. And what was even better was that they could find pupusas in almost every single corner. Asher would never get over how much he loved pupusas, especially the local ones. His parents did make a great effort to feed him Salvadorian food regularly. But if Asher had to be honest, he would admit that the magic of Salvadorian cooking didn't run in any of his parents' families. Either way, he was thankful that they had done their best to raise him, both as an American kid as well as a Latino one. This is why Asher could speak both Spanish and English perfectly. He could belt out the latest songs in English, as well as sing many of the first reggaeton songs from the 2000s. Asher didn't really like newer reggaeton songs because he found that the quality of the lyrics wasn't the same as before. He found the older ones much better. His Salvadorian family had taught him all about what was now known as reggaeton clásico. These two words together always made Asher laugh. Not in a million years would he have imagined that people would be allowed to use the word classic for anything related to this kind of music. Knowing Spanish, Asher's TV options were much wider as well. He was initially surprised at the abundant amount of great productions that had Spanish as their original language. Now, when he spotted something in Spanish on a streaming platform, he instinctively expected it to be good. Asher felt pretty lucky for having the opportunity of knowing and being a part of two wonderful cultures. Yes, there was always the occasional kid who stared weirdly at him because of how he looked. But Asher had learned to live with that side of being a Latin American person in the United States. Asher didn't look very American. He looked a lot more like his dad did. Gabriel had medium brown skin and straight dark brown hair that he wore in a side-parted fashion. A couple of thick brown eyebrows accompanied his sparkling caramel gaze. On the other hand, Asher's mom looked very different. She had white skin and light blue eyes that looked like clear water washing over a white sand beach. The tiny freckles scattered on her nose were reminiscent of golden sand grains, and her shoulder-length hair was blonde and wavy, as if it were trying to emulate the water's movement in her ocean eyes. Due to a little something called genetics, neither Asher nor Noah turned out looking like a 50-50 chocolate vanilla ice cream swirl, which was what Asher had always thought to be how he was supposed to look before he took biology in school. For a big part of his life, Asher had actually been mystified as to why he didn't have one blue eye and one brown eye. In reality, Asher was born with light brown-colored skin. Because he had loved to do outdoor sports like soccer ever since he was little, he had developed a warm tan skin color akin to roasted almonds over time. His eyes looked like fresh honey. He had thickish eyebrows, and his hair was silky and straight, falling in front of his forehead and around each side of his face like two short, medium-length, dark chocolate curtains. Finally, 10-month-old Noah had a lighter skin tone. It was still on the brown side, but lighter than Asher's. His eyes were dark blue, almost like blueberries in fact, which was funny because this was Noah's favorite fruit. His eyebrows were thin like his mother's, and his hair was just amazing. Asher was secretly jealous of that big head of golden waviness. But he was also relieved that his brother would blend in better in the United States. He would probably look like a cool surfer kid and nobody would look at him funny, like it happened to Asher. After blowing all the 15 candles on his cheesecake, Asher smiled for the traditional birthday selfie that his dad always took. After this, the three of them walked towards the kitchen and sat down. Asher's dad cut some pieces of cake and served them in plates for each one of them. His mom brought some spoons. They all dug in and savored that perfectly baked cake and those sweet and fresh strawberries. A tiny explosion happened in Asher's mouth as each and every one of his taste buds jumped for joy. "This was delicious, Mom, thank you," Asher said. "I'm very happy to hear that, hon," she said, standing up and smiling affectionately. Asher's dad stood up too and held something behind his back. "What's that you got there, Dad?" "This is your birthday present, Asher. We hope you enjoy it." He handed Asher a rectangular gift-wrapped box. Asher had a slight idea of what it was, but he didn't want to get his hopes up too soon. He started unwrapping his gift with the excitement of a child on Christmas. The letters VIS started peeking behind the torn wrapping paper. Asher's eyes grew wider, and he continued to tear the paper apart in a frenzy. "Aha!" Asher exclaimed in triumph. "You guys fooled me. All that talk about having spent more than you expected on renting the cabin and on Noah because of his ridiculously fast-changing clothing sizes." Asher looked at his parents with a playful smile as he shook his head lightly. "But here it is. Vista Forbidden East." He lifted the plastic box that held the video game disc in the air like a trophy, or like Rafiki holding up Simba. Yes, his mother had shown him all the classic Disney films when he was little, and yes, he liked a lot of them. He had really been waiting for this video game to come out and to be able to play it. Every review he had watched or read online praised the game for its graphics, storyline, and character development, as well as for the improved gameplay mechanics. Basically, Asher expected this to be his new favorite game. He was extremely excited to go and play it on his treasured GameStation Z console. Asher ran towards the living room, where he had installed his video game console. He was so excited, in fact, that he had unconsciously slipped into a state of minor euphoria in which he really wasn't thinking very much. The only thing on his mind was how eternal the game's loading time was feeling. The sound of a familiar ringtone accompanied by an insistent buzzing grazed Asher's euphoria bubble. This call needed to be answered urgently in order to keep the bubble intact. "Hello?" "Surprise, birthday boy! We're outside!"